Hello, I'm Wally Wood, and this is the Revelation File News Forum, or the news program. I thank you for your dedication in watching these programs, that we are nearing our 50th program very soon, and we sense that there's a change coming in what we're going to be doing after number 50, and the format that we'll be taking on at that time. And we'll try to make this a little bit more clear to you as we go on. But over the past several programs, since we crossed into 2020, I've been doing an overview, if you will, of some of the old material that we've shared in previous programs, mostly for the sake of our new audience, because we know we have people tuning in fresh all the time, and they probably don't understand what it is we're talking about. And the whole idea behind this particular program is to present you ongoing global trends and developments of a world that is heading dramatically into a totally different global setup, a new world order, if you will, surrounding a global government system where all nations will have surrendered their national sovereignty into a single global entity, governance, with a global leader. This is not speculation. This is not conspiracy theory. These are the facts. I'm a newsman by trade, and I've spent the bulk of my adult years in the business of news and from the perspective of end-time Bible prophecy. So we invite you to go back and look at the previous programs in this archive series to gain the education that you need, the information, to help set your mind on why it is you're seeing what you're seeing in world news, what it all means, and where it's taking us. As for today's program, this is what we're calling series point number 4 in our series on Turning Point 2020. As a kind of a reminder of our previous program before today's show, we took a look at what I call the Antichrist prototypes. We've taken the last couple of programs to give you details into certain individuals that are on the world scene today, that qualify in my book as Antichrist potentials. And each of these individuals, we've presented them to you, not by name, but by what they are doing, their fame, if you will. And these are the contemporary candidates for the position of Antichrist. To date, there are 7 of them. And we started with the one that you see on the upper right that I called the Mystery Man, who was big in the media back in the 80s, 90s, before the turn of the century, but around that time frame. And we quoted from a number of media sources concerning this one man. Since that time, these others have come to the front. Some of them are in current world leadership. Others are up and coming. And I gave you some details about each of them. And we especially honed in on the one that you see in the middle, because he's the latest one, and he is the most promising one among the 7 currently that could qualify as the Antichrist himself. So that's how close we are. If you've been with this show very long, you know I've said this before, that I used to say that the Antichrist is in the wings. Now I'm saying he's in the green room. He's waiting for his call to come out on stage and to move forward in his prophesied destiny. So these are the 7 candidates that I have been watching for over 20 years, and they're very much worth keeping an eye on. I'm not going to take the risk of exposing them foolishly by naming them. That would be silly, and it would put me in a lot of trouble. But just bringing your attention to the fact that there are some individuals up and coming on the world scene that you will be hearing about in one form, fashion, or another very soon. The World Economic Forum mentioned, and I quote, "As a world, we are now facing a future where, more than ever, we need strong, effective leadership." In our 2014 survey on the global agenda, 86% of the respondents strongly agree the world is facing a leadership crisis today. To solve our leadership crisis, something big needs to change. On the international stage, we need our leaders to overhaul the system of global governance, speaking of world government, which aspires to provide leadership on a collective worldwide scale. That is world governance. We're now entering a decade of decisive directions, a world that is in much need of stability and sanity from the reality of an unending bombardment of fear, anxiety, and stress. Point number one, this is what I'm calling the decade of darkness. And again, I'm telling you that these were things that we went into greater depth on our previous program to tonight's show. Jesus said that the generation that sees these things will not cease to exist, will not pass away until everything had been fulfilled, which included his return. And that's Matthew 24:34. He also alerted the body of Christ to not let your heart be troubled. Do not be dismayed. Do not fear. These things must come to pass before he returns. And that's our focus, is the return of the Lord and the events, the trends, the situations in the world that are part of what Bible prophecy said would exist just immediately preceding his return. So that's Decade of Darkness, Part 1. Part 2 is the Decade of Decision. Global leaders, world parliaments, world gatherings of nations will decide in a short order how they want this world to continue on. And they will be deciding on what Time magazine in 1977 called the president of planet Earth. So very soon, and when I say soon, I'm speaking within less than 10 years, that a decision will be made and the global president will be in office. Third, this is a decade of declaration on the part of the body of Christ. In Daniel 11:32, in the midst of this darkness, we're told that the people who know their God will rise up and do great exploits. What does this mean? What kind of great exploits are we talking about here? In upcoming programs, after we get past Program 50 in this current package, we're going to spend more time teaching and preparing the body of Christ for what this means. I've said for a long time that the work of the prophet is twofold. It's to prophesy and to prepare. I do not claim to be a prophet. I've never accepted the title of such. I'm just a guy who studies Bible prophecy and happens to be blessed enough to be in the media professionally, and I collect the dots and connect the dots. But the work of the prophet, that's what I claim, to prophesy and to prepare. So we will take a greater look, a deeper look into what kind of people will know their God to the point that they will go forth and do great exploits at a time where Jesus and Daniel both said it'll be a time the likes of which has never been since there was a nation until that time. So that's what we are looking forward to as we go into the next era of programs on the Revelation File. What's happening to America? Media around the world are addressing the decline of America, America's impact, America's influence around the world. It's being talked about, published. There's much out there. And a lot is being said about the concern of a weakening America. Well, part of the reasons for our falling apart, if you will, as a strong nation, is the fact that we've thrown God out. We've thrown out the Ten Commandments from the schoolhouse, the courthouse, federal offices. We are a nation that has turned our back at large on God and what He has said in His Word on how nations and people are to behave. We've thrown out the Ten Commandments. In an article that appeared originally in the Dallas Morning News and was picked up by the Houston Chronicle, August 27, 2007, addressing the subject of living dangerously in the absence of holy fear, the consequences of cringing at the Ten Commandments. We present to you certain select excerpts from this remarkable article that appear in these two daily newspapers. Concerning the impact of the Ten Commandments, otherwise known as the Decalogue, at the core of any social structure, author David Klinghoffer is marvelously lucid in his book, Shattered Tablets, Why We Ignore the Ten Commandments at Our Peril. It weaves theological insight with the author's reflections on living in a society, that being ours, that has cast off the Ten Commandments' authority. Klinghoffer is a religious Jew, but his argument is as sociological as it is theological. The Ten Commandments are far more than a list of taboos, Klinghoffer explains. They reveal what it means to live a fully human life, both as individuals and in community. And as commandments, not suggestions, they provide us with the psychological means of doing so. That is, the justice of the commandments is guaranteed by the God who issued those commandments, an all-powerful being who will judge individuals and cultures by these laws. The old-fashioned phrase, fear of the Lord, meant precisely the respect men owed to God and his laws, a respect that, properly understood, bound their consciences and compelled their obedience. Now, again, please keep in mind, this is an article that appeared in the Houston Chronicle and the Dallas Morning News in August 2007. Continuing to read, Klinghoffer cites the work of noted Baylor University sociologist Rodney Stark, who found that across global cultures, the degree to which individuals believe in a personal God indicates how likely they are to behave morally. You don't have to believe in God to be good, but it demonstrably helps. Klinghoffer identifies the loss of the Ten Commandments as responsible for America's cultural crisis. This is essentially the same conclusion reached by the late Philip Reif, an agnostic Jew who was one of the 20th century's most important social critics. Reif, a sociologist whose most important work dealt with psychology and religion, taught that all cultures develop from prohibitions. That is, the creative tension between the commanding thou shalt not and the assertive I will. We now dwell in an anti-culture, according to Reif, in which we no longer feel the pull of old prohibitions against the expression of individual instinct. In biblical terms, we've lost the fear of the Lord. And in Reif's telling, the absence of holy fear makes us terrors unto ourselves and to one another. By placing the self in the place of God, said Reif, Western man has passed into a perilous state in which his fear, anxiety, and loss of ultimate meaning can only be endured through pleasure-seeking and other therapeutic means. We latter-day Americans are wealthy and cultured, but we quickly approach a state of barbarism, which Reif defines as, quote, the sophisticated cutting off of the inhibiting authority of the past, end of quote. Popular American Christianity, with its Jesus as best friend rather than sovereign Lord, is, in Reif's view, an ersatz, or a shallow, weak substitute. 2 Timothy 3, verse 1, in the Amplified Version reads, but understand this, that in the last days, dangerous, perilous times of great stress and trouble will come, meaning difficult days that will be hard to bear. What both the believing Jew Klinghoffer and the unbelieving Jew Reif affirm is the absolute requirement of religious grounding to maintain a moral culture. We will live in holy terror, the fear of the Lord, or we will live in terror of ourselves and one another. Why? Because we know what humans who recognize no authority but themselves are capable of. How a culture thinks about God will go a long way toward determining how it thinks about other people, writes Klinghoffer. For all our historical crimes and failings, no culture in the history of the world has treated the individual with as much respect as the Western civilization, which derived its worldview largely from the Bible. If we lose the image of God as revealed in the laws that he declared on Sinai, we will lose the Western image of the human person. And then, many of us think of the Ten Commandments as noble sentiments from simpler days, worthy but naive concepts that we left behind in Sunday school. Funny how the older we get, especially if you have children, the ideas you once dismissed or forgot about turn out to be the most important ones of all. End of quote. That's a remarkable article, but what's even more remarkable is that it was printed in daily secular newspapers. That's amazing to me. Living dangerously in the absence of holy fear. 2 Timothy 3, verses 1 through 5, picking up where the author of that article left off in the Amplified Version. But understand this, that in the last days, dangerous times of great stress and trouble will come, difficult days that will be hard to bear. For people will be lovers of self, narcissistic, self-focused, lovers of money, impelled by greed, boastful, arrogant, revilers, disobedient to parents, ungrateful, unholy, and profane. And they will be unloving, devoid of natural human affection, calloused and inhumane, irreconcilable, malicious gossips, devoid of self-control, meaning intemperate and immoral, brutal, haters of good, traitors, reckless, conceited, lovers of sensual pleasure rather than lovers of God, holding to a form of outward godliness in religion, although they have denied its power, for their conduct nullifies their claim of faith. Avoid such people and keep far away from them. End of quote. Boy, you're talking about a joyful message. That's in the Bible of the last days. Who among us can't read this and see today's headlines and today's news? Remarkable. Psalms 33, verse 12, Blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. Abraham Lincoln said one time, I know that the Lord is always on the side of the right, but it is my constant anxiety and prayer that I and this nation may be on the Lord's side.
If I were the devil, if I were the devil, if I were the prince of darkness, I'd want to engulf the whole world in darkness, and I'd have a third of its real estate and 4/5 of its population, but I wouldn't be happy until I had seized the ripest apple on the tree, thee. So I'd set about, however necessary, to take over the United States. I'd subvert the churches first. I'd begin with a campaign of whispers. With the wisdom of a serpent, I would whisper to you as I whispered to Eve, do as you please. To the young, I would whisper that the Bible is a myth. I would convince them that man created God instead of the other way around. I would confide that what's bad is good and what's good is square. And the old I would teach to pray after me, Our Father, which art in Washington. And then I'd get organized. I'd educate authors in how to make lurid literature exciting so that anything else would appear dull and uninteresting. I'd threaten TV with dirtier movies and vice versa. I'd peddle narcotics to whom I could. I'd sell alcohol to ladies and gentlemen of distinction. I'd tranquilize the rest with pills. If I were the devil, I'd soon have families at war with themselves, churches at war with themselves, and nations at war with themselves, until each in its turn was consumed. And with promises of higher ratings, I'd have mesmerizing media fanning the flames. If I were the devil, I would encourage schools to refine young intellects, but neglect to discipline emotions. Just let those run wild. Until before you knew it, you'd have to have drug-sniffing dogs and metal detectors at every schoolhouse door. Within a decade, I'd have prisons overflowing. I'd have judges promoting pornography. Soon I could evict God from the courthouse, then from the schoolhouse, and then from the houses of Congress. And in his own churches, I would substitute psychology for religion and deify science. I would lure priests and pastors into misusing boys and girls and church money. If I were the devil, I'd make the symbol of Easter an egg and the symbol of Christmas a bottle. If I were the devil, I'd take from those who have and give to those who wanted until I had killed the incentive of the ambitious. And what'll you bet? I couldn't get whole states to promote gambling as the way to get rich. I would caution against extremes in hard work, in patriotism, in moral conduct. I would convince the young that marriage is old-fashioned, that swinging is more fun, that what you see on TV is the way to be. And thus I could undress you in public, and I could lure you into bed with diseases for which there is no cure. In other words, if I were the devil, I'd just keep right on doing what he's doing. Paul Harvey. Good day.
Absolutely amazing. Prophetic voices have been around us for generations. But what really brings them to life is when society catches up with those prophetic voices, no matter how long ago they were spoken. That was 50 years ago. And look where we are today. Drug-sniffing dogs at schoolhouse doors. It's just amazing how we've come and what it all means. As we go into our next program, let me give you some introduction to it. We'll be talking about the democracy in decline or in demise, how democracy is fading out and what's going to replace it. And this plays along the same theme as we've been addressing over the past few programs, having to do with the rise of one strong man. The Bible has long predicted it, and you can read about the Antichrist in the book of Daniel, in the four Gospels, the book of Revelation, Thessalonians. There's plenty there to tell you what the last empirical world leader will be like. But let me give you just a little bit of a taste of our next program to show you that indeed we are there currently. It's just a matter of a short amount of time before it all begins to unfold into what the Bible long predicted would be the administration of the Antichrist. Government by the people is disappearing. Here's why and what's next. All around the world, media sources are picking up this idea that democracy itself is dying. And they're asking the question as to why, and proving by statistics that indeed it is, and what lies beyond democracy around the world. Where are we headed next? The Economist. In office but not in power, are Western democracies becoming ungovernable? Politicians sometimes say so, but mean different things in different countries. And this was in the August 1st, 2019 edition of The Economist magazine out of England. Just to share a portion of what they said in that article. A specter is haunting the rich world. It is the specter of ungovernability. When you survey the political landscape of rich countries, you see an unusual amount of chaos and upheaval. Prague has seen the largest demonstrations since the overthrow of communism. More than a quarter of the current parliaments in Europe were elected in polls that were called early. In Britain, the mother of parliaments has been at the gin bottle, and opinion polls everywhere show increasing numbers of people losing patience with democratic niceties and hankering after a strong man. End of quote. Is democracy really dying? The New Republic asked, and that was in August 20th, 2018. While so many commentators share an overly grim view of America's fate. Quoting a section of this, is democracy in crisis? Quoting, in a survey of democracy's health in the United States, Europe, and Asia, it was found that faith in government has nosedived, political parties are fracturing, And efforts to pacify voters through more public spending has sent both inflation rates and deficits soaring. Too many people, blacks, Indians, Chicanos, white ethnic groups, students, and women, are demanding too much from politics, rendering the entire system ungovernable. The percentage of people who say that living in a democracy is essential has declined, and polls show rising support for non-democratic forms of government, from technocracy to military rule. Non-democratic forms of government. It's possible that a more profound shift is underway. Democracy's latest crisis opens the way for a new kind of politics. End of quote. That's where we are. And that's how the media is reporting it and seeing it, and they're very concerned about what is coming in this new trend, this new generation. So, let me say again at the outset as we close today's program, I'm not a doom and gloomer. I'm a reporter. And my task, my assignment from the Lord has long been, since the 70s, to read the world. That's what he told me. Read the world. For in what they're writing and what they're reporting, you'll find my prophetic word in fulfillment. I've spent my entire life in this field of just collecting what the world is saying, what the world is writing, what they're producing, and comparing it with end-time prophecy. So I'm not here to leave a bad taste in your mouth. There is good news in all this, but you have to have an ear to hear. You have to be teachable. You have to be hungry to know the truth so that you can survive better the times that are coming. They're even now at hand. Jesus said, the generation that sees this will not cease to exist until everything has been fulfilled, which included his return. I invite you to come back and see our next program. We'll be looking more deeper into this idea of the death of democracy and what lies beyond. I'm Wally Wood. I thank you for listening, and we look forward to having you back with us next time.
You have been watching the Revelation File Report with Wally Wood, a Wally Wood Ministries production from Houston, Texas. You are able to support the ministry by donating at wallywoodministries.com and by mail at Wally Wood Ministries, P.O. Box 42005, Houston, Texas 77242. Wally is available to present full 2-hour forums in your city called the Revelation File News Forum. For more details, contact Andy Valadez at 713-560-3348 or by email at andy@andyvaladez.com. The Revelation File News Report is a weekly update of global trends in the news as it aligns with end-time Bible prophecy. Tune in again next time and be sure to like and share this channel.